The last topic for today is freedom and destiny in ancient Greek thought and Africa. And of course, we are still within the philosophy of religion unit. And we start by defining destiny. Sometimes destiny is referred to as fate, from the Latin fatum, which means decree, prediction, destiny, fate, and is a predetermined course of events. It may be conceived as a predetermined future, whether in general or of an individual. But of course, in Africa, emphasis is not on individual. Although when you study the Yoruba traditions in Nigeria, you find they talk of also a human being choosing his destiny as he is coming into the world. I need to explore much on that. Or we need to, you need to. But community solidarity has a critical factor in determining who you become because of the Ubuntu philosophy, the communalistic philosophies of African people, rooted in indigenous religions. But destiny can be seen from individual and general, community versus individual. Destiny is defined as the power believed to control events, which people simply call fate or fate. Destiny, again, I repeat, is about the future, the spiritual will of a person. And sometimes, depending on the situation you are looking at, if you are talking about African context, there's too much communality. Of course, Africa of the 15th century is not the Africa of the 21st century. There is a lot of changes that have taken place, including westernization, where a person has a lot to do with the destiny, determining his destiny. It is usually affected by time, date of birth, and the environment that you grow in. In Africa, there is a strong belief among various communities that humanity chooses their respective destinies as communities, and even, as I've noted, among the Yoruba of Nigeria, is about also as individuals, you also choose or your respective destiny. Of course, this is now becoming a common currency with the globalization, which is in actual fact changing the status quo. The idea of a God-controlled destiny plays a very prominent role in various religions. The ancient Sumerians spoke of divine predetermination of the individual's destiny. In Babylonian religion, the god Nabu, as the god of writing, inscribed the fates assigned to men and women or human beings by the gods of the Assyrian Babylonian pantheon, which included the Anunnaki, who would decree the fates of humanity. Followers of ancient Greek religion regarded not only the Moirai, but also the gods, particularly Zeus, as responsible for deciding and carrying out destiny respectively. Followers of Christianity consider God to be the only force with control over one's fate, and that he has a plan for every person. Now, many believe that humans all have free will, which is contrasted with predestination, although naturally inclined to act according to God's desire. In Islam, fate or qadar is a decree of God. Only God in Islam would decree your destiny in Islam. Of course, we have noted that even among Christians, they also see God to be the only force with control over one's fate, and that God has a plan for every person. Of course, there is also the belief that humans have what we call free will, which is contrasted with predestination, although naturally it is inclined to act according to God's desire. It's all about fate and destiny. Now, in African traditional, we prefer to call it indigenous religion. It refers to the indigenous religions of the African people, and they deal with the cosmology or the study of the universe, the ritual practices, the symbols, the arts, society, and so on and so forth. Because religion is a way of life which permeates all pillars of culture, making it very difficult to tell the demarcating line between religion and culture. It relates to culture and society as they affect the worldview of the African people. So destiny is woven together, is woven within or interwoven within religion, culture, and society, because that constitutes the African worldview. Now, destiny is about the future, the spiritual will of a person. It is usually affected by time, date of birth, we have noted that, and that's where we brought in the idea of the Yoruba, who believe that a person can control Ayanmo. Ayanmo means destiny. You can control it. While you are coming into this world, you can control it. You have a role. It's like the idea of free will. In a way, you can do it. Though that does not mean it rules out the environment, the community we're in. Yeah. Humanity kneels down, according to the same Yoruba argument of Nigeria, that humanity kneels down to choose his or her way out before the presence of God and Orunmila, the oracle divinity, and God sanctions it. But according to one scholar, or these two scholars who have written jointly, Aworaru and Ndopamu, human destiny is unalterable save the divinities. In other words, you cannot alter it, save the divinities. The weakened people of the world, Omo Alaye, what human does on his or her own free will, that is Afowafa, it has a lot with what we are calling free will, with what you do. It has to do with your destiny. It is like St. Paul's talking about work out for your own salvation. So it's not just sitting down and being a parasite or expecting other people to do things. The Europa case has taught us that what one does determines how the end will be. It is not just the end justifies the means. It's also a question of our own individual role. What have we done? Now, in the history of ancient Greek thought, the question of how to live a livable life is a principal arouser of those who dedicate time to think about the meaning and sense of human being and his or her place in the universe. Greek poets and philosophers observed that in the empirical world, everything changed and nothing was eternal. But the experience of pure contingency dominated by lack turns human existence into a senseless occupation. The philosophical theories in Greek thought concerning the nature and destiny of humanity have their roots in Greek religion. In this regard, there are two basic ideas which constitute structuring principles for both Greek religion and Greek philosophy. Although ancient philosophy tried to transcend plain human knowledge and elevate itself by imitating the divine science, it never had the illusion of being in complete possession of an absolute and universal wisdom. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, insisted with great emphasis on the limits of human knowledge. In his physics, metaphysics, politics, and ethics, he philosophized on physics, metaphysics, politics, and ethics. And in all these schools of thoughts that he philosophized, he questioned, in all of them, he questioned over and over again where human wisdom starts, where human wisdom ends, and where ignorance begins. The main question that guided his works was how knowledge can be reliable and still be beautifully human. Although in the Nicomachean ethics, what he called Nicomachean ethics, those schools he had started, those schools in philosophy that he built on in his academy. Although in the Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle invites us to immortalize. He adds an important detail. We should try to assimilate the gods as much as possible. So he also brought in the whole idea of religion having a huge part in matters to do with our own destiny. Aristotle, in the year 3 BCE, before Christ, he contended that the divine wisdom is an ideal that guides the human being and elevates his human opinions, all human opinions. So Aristotle also saw that the wisdom from above, beyond human conception, also elevates human opinions. It makes it stronger. It makes it better. It is a regulatory principle and not a constitutive quality. So we should try to imitate the divine science, but never have the illusion to possess it completely. Aristotle offers an intellectualism of the limits and not a triumphant rationalism. Although the highest state of being is the contemplation of universal and eternal wisdom, our human condition ties us to live in the mortal part of the universe and interact with the changes and insecurities of contingency. In the ancient Greek world, thus, the intellectual knowledge had a social function. In archaic and classic thought, there is no rigid dichotomy between the self and the other. The Greek citizens never conceived his individuality as a separate being alienated from his community. It is the sense of togetherness that gives him a personal value. The metaphysical conception of limits has a natural extension in the contingency of socio-political spheres. In ancient Greek societies, ethics and politics were conceived as inseparable knowledge areas. That is, the individual virtues needed the community to practice and were meant to serve the common good. The task of philosophy was to educate the citizens in practicing their ethical political skills. That was the task of philosophy, to help people practicalize the moral, ethical, and socio-political skills learned in the course of theorizing in philosophical academies. So the Greek citizen gained awareness of his individual ethical being through his awareness of the limits of the universe, guarded by gods, destiny, and social structures. Remember, here we had gods, Greek gods such as Zeus. Now, in the publication or in one of his works, you call it Paindo. So in the Paindo, Socrates and his friends are discussing that most profound question of the meaning of humans' life and death. It is Socrates' last day on earth, the sunset of that day, which is the sunset of his life. Having learned from Heraclitus before him, those who are called pre-Socrates, that life is but the gateway to death, he nevertheless, Socrates dared to affirm, to show he doesn't fear death, because he felt his destiny is well carved. He said, I quote, but I have great hopes that there is something in store for the dead, and as has been said of old, something better for the good than for the wicked. I wish now to explain to you, my judges, that the reason why I think a man who has really spent his life in philosophy, the love of wisdom, is naturally of good courage when he is to die, and has strong hopes that when he is dead, he will attain the greatest blessings in that other land. End of quotes. So Socrates would see death as nothing. As a philosopher would say, a philosopher doesn't have to fear death. He knows more about destiny. And is of good courage. A philosopher is of good courage. Of course, we are now talking about philosophy of religion, but you can see you do not know the demarcating line between pure philosophy and the philosophy of religion, because they are one and the same thing. So one has to have to be naturally of good courage when he is to die, and has to have strong hopes that when he is dead, he will attain the greatest blessings in that other land. So he was talking about that other land. So the idea of afterlife for a philosopher, in the way I see Socrates implying, ought to be there and has to be there. Of course, there are those philosophers who are atheists like Nietzsche and others, and Paul Sartre and others. But Socrates appeared to be talking like modern day Christians or modern day religious practitioners who talk about the afterlife, the life after going to heaven and all that. He never used the words heaven, or like African believer in African religious beliefs who talk about becoming an ancestral spirit upon death. They are therefore living with the people, being here and not here, living within the paradox of life and death, not dead and not alive, being there, being far yet near. Okay, that is Socrates for you. I remember one theologian by name Justin Martyr. He once described Socrates as a Christian before Christ. In other words, before Christ was born, there was this philosopher, Socrates, who behaved like Christ, even accepting to die after he was accused of corrupting the youth in the city with his teachings, that he was radicalizing the youth by enlightening them with his philosophy. And then he was told, you choose between death or life. And he said, I would rather choose death because I cannot recant what I have been teaching. And equally, in later years, there was this Bishop Polycarp who also said the same. At 86 years, how can I recant what I've been preaching or teaching? Let me die. And that is how he ended up dying. If now there is a life which is to survive transformation into death as its opposite, that life must be a reality which is exempt from the wound of qualitative opposites, which constitutes the world of being. This reality Plato calls soul. This is the reality Plato calls soul. In this manner, then, we are brought to the basic question of the nature of the soul, or of man or humanity in its most fundamental being. Now, Plato makes it very clear that there must be something in our experience that warrants the belief in the soul as a power and a reality which is exempt from the flux of nature so as to survive the death of the body. Now, the great Phaedrus myth, that is Phaedrus myth, among the Greeks, is addressed to this particular matter of soul. Plato says, we will liken the soul to the composite nature of a pair of winged horses and a charioteer. We will liken the soul to the composite nature of a pair of winged horses and a charioteer. The wings which are attached to the horses, I explain, the wings which are attached to the horses and possibly to the charioteer himself, raise the chariot to the supercelestial regions where the divine spectacle becomes visible to the charioteer. The two steeds are able to pull the chariot around and around on a level, but cannot raise it. One steed is noble and of noble breed, and is able to pull the chariot ahead in the race to a distant goal. The other horse is quite the opposite in breed and character, constantly getting out of control, taking the bit into its own teeth to follow his or her own interest, oblivious to the race as well as to the upper regions. Plato employs this imagery to remind us that there are qualitatively distinct phases of experience of which we are aware. There is in us an aspiration which raises us to the level of peace and harmony, where the broad structure of reality becomes discernible to reason. Thank you very much.